This is Jesse Enkamp. All right. The video title is I entered a BJJ tournament to prove that it doesn't work. I have not actually watched the entirety of this video. It is 8 minutes long. If it gets slow, I'll go ahead and I'll try and skip through. But we're going to try and watch the entirety of this video and react to it. All right. We're not just trying to rip his content or anything like that. Jesse Enkamp seems like a cool guy. All right. But I want to react to this because it's interesting to me because Jesse Enkamp is a karate guy, right? He's the guy who, like, he knows everything about karate, including, like, the fact that kata was actually supposed to be a lot of grappling techniques. And, he knows, like, the history and cool facts and things like that. And he also works a lot with, like, Icy Mike, for instance, and a lot of other MMA YouTubers. There's kind of a mainstream MMA YouTube, a mainstream martial arts YouTube that I am never going to be a part of. That I will not be a part of because I am not happy-go-lucky enough. I'm not, hey, everybody, enough, right? Icy Mike is kind of the bottom of that, right? Where it's like, okay, if he was just a little bit more sarcastic, if he was just a little bit less personable, if he was just a little bit more cynical, right? He wouldn't be able to make it in MMA YouTube in the way that he does, right? Me, if Icy Mike is here, I'm fucking down here. All right, that's where I'm at. So, being a karate guy who, to my understanding, hasn't really done that much Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, you would think that he would get clobbered at a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournament. We're going to go ahead and see about that.
Today, I'm entering a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournament to prove that it doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, and I think he's like Dutch or something as well.
Just prove my point.
Oh.
They say 90% of fights end up on the ground. But 100% start standing up, and that's where we want the fight to end.
Because this is the last place you want to be in a street fight!
Yet there's a whole martial...
Okay, yes, that's true, but you also, again, like, this kind of goes into what I was saying a little bit earlier in the stream. You need to be able to stand up. You need to be able to know what to do when that ends up happening, right? You don't just want to sit there on the ground like this, taking shots while shelled up. You have to be able to have the know-how as well as the grit to be able to just keep going in a situation like that. Because if you're just going to lay there and you're going to take punches and kicks, you're going to take punches and kicks. But if you get up and you start doing something, even if you just try and grab at a dude's leg, right, to try and trip him up or something like that, you start like thrashing even and things like that. Could you still get hit? Yeah, there's a potential. In fact, you're most certainly going to get hit, right? It is a fight. You're going to get hit. But there's more of a chance of you doing something right so that you can get out of it, right? And that's kind of the thing that a lot of different martial arts and things like that are standing arts mainly, I won't say only, but mainly, that's one of the things that they kind of neglect when it comes to that whole you don't want to go to the ground in a street fight thing. It is true. You typically aren't going to want to go to the ground in any situation unless you absolutely have to. But if you have to, you might as well make it worth your while. You might as well make it worth it for you, right? Even if it is by accident, even if it's a disadvantageous situation and things like that. Exactly. Tom H. said, don't make it easy for them.
art dedicated to this worst-case scenario. That's like my karate class practicing how to get knocked out. Just makes no sense.
It is pretty realistic for that kind of training that they're doing, though.
And to prove my point, I'm going to enter a tournament on the street and simply stand up. But
And
first,
simply
I gotta
stand up.
practice.
Okay, turns out standing up is much harder than I thought. Especially when somebody wants to hold you down.
I want a new opponent.
My next
So, this is actually one of the issues with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, right? We're going to go ahead, we're going to bring it back just a little bit, right?
I want a new opponent.
Look at where they're starting. And maybe they just don't have that much space, right? I mean, that is a packed gym, right? Like, when I open up a gym, if I get half that many students, I will cry tears of joy, right? But maybe it's a space issue, but I don't know. It seems like they got plenty of space over here. I would assume that if the cameraman backed up a little bit and they moved away from the fence and the wall a little bit, maybe they'd have a little bit more room, right? But a lot of jiu-jitsu schools, they start on their knees. And the reason why is because what tends to happen when two people decide they're going to start standing is nobody wants to be the one who ends up on bottom. And because of this, you have basically a takedown battle for 5 or more minutes, right? And it's not a good takedown battle. It's not like a wrestling battle where two guys are like, it's interesting and there's a lot of action and things like that. It's basically two guys who are just so afraid to get taken down that like they fight like hell to not get taken down, and they don't actually get any real on the ground grappling in. Right? So there is a practical purpose for them starting on their knees, but what you see a lot of the time is there's a lot of jiu-jitsu schools where they only start on the knees, and this is where you get guard pullers from, is because you naturally are given to pulling guard in a situation like that, right? Even if you do try to take the initiative, you're not pulling guard, you decide you're gonna go to, we call it the samurai walk position, which is basically where Jesse is right now. Even if you decide to go for that, you're very limited on the attacks that you have. You know, I think I could name like 3 or 4 attacks that you have that you could use from your knees. And the thing is, like, when it comes to the real thing, you would never, ever grapple like this on your knees. It's not a position that you would start from. Neither would you with Mr. I believe looks like a brown belt. I don't know. The color might be off, but that does appear to be a brown belt, right? You would never start from this position. And that is one of the issues with jiu-jitsu in general, whether it's like modern day jiu-jitsu or if it's, you know, jiu-jitsu from the past or something like that. I'm not sure how they did it 20 years ago, but I know 10 years ago when I started jiu-jitsu, I hated it because that's how we practiced, right? You don't want to just constantly do that. You have to get legitimate takedown practice in, not just drilling either, but you have to start from your feet and you have to shoot in for takedowns, you know? And that's what I bring to the table in terms of my gym, is I'm the takedowns guy.
My next opponent is just a brown belt, but he immediately chokes me out.
That's called an Ezekiel
We call
choke.
this an Ezekiel choke. And now that I know how it works,
know my shit,
I can
guys.
easily avoid it.
All right,
last
see,
opponent
again.
is a black belt. Luckily, I'm both younger and stronger. But
That right there is a crucifix. It looks like some kind of mod. It looked like a crucifix anyway. I don't know. Let's go back a little bit, right? Yeah, it looked like he got him in a crucifix, but I don't exactly know what he's tapping to. I got to be honest with you.
But every time I try to stand up,
I don't know what he's tapping
way.
to. Guillotine looks like.
This is not what I had in mind.
I think with that crucifix, he just got his arm stretched in a way, and he didn't realize. Cause like, look, here's the thing, right? If you have an arm bar, right? The person's pulling my arm this way. My thumb is facing this way, right? They're trying to hyperextend my arm like that. If I turn my arm that way, all of a sudden they can't hyperextend it that way anymore. If they pull, they're basically going to be pulling this way. I think what happened is he didn't know, right? He didn't know what was happening. So because of that, he just kind of felt like his arm being pulled in one way. And he was just like, oh, shit. Okay, all right. I guess I'll just tap. You know, I feel a little bit of stress on my arm. I don't know if he's done jiu-jitsu, right? I'm pretty sure this is his gym. I don't know if he's ever done it. I would assume maybe he's done a class or two, right? But the way he's trying to sell it right now is like he has no clue what's going on at all, right? And maybe that was also just for show, but it was really strange to see that because like it didn't really look like there was much of anything there, you know?
That's when my brother Oliver appears.
Not as easy as you thought, huh?
Oh,
As a
so his
professional
brother's a
fighter,
white belt.
He knows what works and what doesn't.
Put this on and meet me upstairs tomorrow. And don't forget what belt you are in BJJ.
And he's got
Yeah,
a plan.
don't forget it, Jesse. Don't forget it, Jesse. I haven't actually watched this video yet. I've watched like the very end, but I haven't watched the whole video yet.
Standing up. You smash me from top. Every second I spend here is a second I get more tired while you get more rest. So
I'm the
See, that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Is what I was talking about, where it's like I'm never gonna be a part of this scene here in YouTube martial arts and things like that, because like these guys are so campy and they're so like weird with it, and I'm not hating, right? Like, you know, they have fun doing what they do and people like it, good for them. But I couldn't ever sit here and go through that entire thing and now do the Rocky thing, right?
Best around. No one's ever gonna hold me down. I'm the best around. I am not afraid
Practicing,
of the ground.
practicing
I'm the
slapping
best
out.
around. No one's ever gonna take me down.
Subscribe!
I'm the best around. I am not afraid of the ground. I'm the best around.
That must have been
No
like
one's
his
ever
wife or
gonna
something.
take me down. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. It's finally game day. After weighing in, they check my sleeves to make sure I'm not hiding any nunchucks. But what they don't know is that I am a weapon. Unfortunately, the weather is not great, and it looks like it might start raining.
That does look pretty cool. I would like to do a Jiu Jitsu
My plan
tournament
might
outside.
not
I'd love to do a tournament on the beach if I could. That'd be really
Unfortunately,
cool.
I can't control the weather. All I can do is start to warm up and hope for the best. That's when they suddenly announce my name. It's finally time to see if Brazilian Jiu Jitsu works when you don't play along. When the fight starts, my opponent immediately tries to grab my sleeves. All I want to do is push his hands away.
You see, he's actually making a mistake here, his opponent. You don't want to grab across the collar like that because you could end up getting armbarred. It's not something you do unless you have a purpose to it. And like a real purpose that you're going to hit immediately. You don't just grab and then hang out, right? You don't just grab and hang out like that and then like, you know, right? You have to be going for whatever you're going for, like, within, like, 3 to 5 seconds after you grab. Because you will end up getting armbarred as things go on.
That's when he does something I never imagined. He just lies down and tries to pull
Alright,
me
guard
on top
pull
of
number
him.
1.
But of course, it doesn't work, because I just stand up. Now, my opponent
Alright, let's see
grabs
what else
my
happens.
lapel. So I try to strip his wrist off with both hands. But his grip is too good.
So, again, he, like... I would want to kill this guy. Because when I see people doing that at my gym, reaching across, I'm like, no, do not do that. Don't do that. It's a bad habit. And I just see this guy, and it's like, okay, fine, he's a white belt. Like, he doesn't know better yet. But, like, that's one of those tiny little details. And you can't get every little tiny little detail ever. Like, you can't. But it's like, dude, like, fuck. That's one of my tiny details. And I'm like, don't do that, right?
That's when he tries to pull me down again.
There's another
But
one.
I just pop
Oh,
back
man.
up and move away.
He ended up,
I can sense
he
that
almost
my
knee
opponent
reaped him.
is getting frustrated because I refuse to go down to the ground.
So what was that? Was that number? There's
That's when he tries
another
a
guard
new
pull.
tactic. He goes for a foot sweep. I decide to return
I
the
wouldn't
favor,
say
but
that's
he fails.
really
Luckily,
going for a
he
foot
just
sweep. I
lies
think he just
down
kind of
anyway.
stepped.
This is when I realized that all my training has made me overqualified for this tournament because I'm never ending up on the ground. That's when
You
the
see what's
referee
happening.
suddenly stops the action. Apparently, I've broken some kind of rule. He tells me that I'm not allowed
Hello?
to disengage. And if I don't start grappling, I'm gonna get disqualified.
Yeah. That's what ends up happening.
Now,
It's
my
one of those
opponent
rules that
refuses to
makes
even
sense,
stand
and it
up.
is something you have to do,
I
but
doubt
it
this
also
what
is like
ancient
kind
samurai
of.
warriors had.
I'll go ahead and I'll pause that. It's stalling. He got called for stalling, which like it's a necessary rule. If somebody's not fighting, they're not fighting. But like the way it is, where like you have to just kind of go into somebody's guard, right? It's not that you even necessarily have to do that. It's just like you can bypass the guard and things like that. But the idea that somebody can lay down and I have to engage with them is like crazy. You know, that's not even something you see in MMA a lot. When you see dudes where one guy's laying on his back and another dude's standing up, usually the dude is like, I don't even want to do this. Like it's not appealing. And he backs off, and then the ref lets the other guy, he lets the other guy up, right? It's just foolish, you know?
Had in mind when they invented Jiu Jitsu. Because it was supposed to be used as a last resort when your weapons fail, and the last place you want to go on the battlefield is the ground. But something changed when the art spread to Brazil. It became a sport, and the essence was lost. This is the exact same thing that happened to karate. Today, you can even become an Olympic champion by getting knocked out. So now
look on
I am
that
left
dude's
with
face.
no other choice but to finish the fight. It's time to put the martial back in martial arts.
You see? Hold on.
It's time to put the martial back.
Okay, so you see that right there, right? If this guy took his left arm, right, and grabbed the lapel, not the lapel, geez, the sleeve here, and then he took his right arm and he grabbed the sleeve here, pulled the arm in, right? What he could have done, and there would have been a little bit more to this. It would have been easier for him to do this if Jesse was on his knees, I will say. But if he then gets this leg over there and that leg around, okay, basically around the head, he has an arm bar. That's what I'm talking about. This is why you don't reach across that way. This is one of those things that when you're a white belt, you're typically taught, like, hey, don't do that. That's a bad thing, you know? Same thing with crossing your feet when you have somebody's back, right? When you're in the position where your legs are wrapped around somebody and you have them in the position you would use a rear naked choke in, you don't cross your feet because that's an easy way to end up getting foot locked. Like, there's small things that are kind of universally taught, I guess you could say, in jiu-jitsu schools. And I'm not trying to say this guy's jiu-jitsu school is bad or anything. There's a chance that he was taught not to do these things, but he just didn't end up taking to the lesson that day. He just forgot, right? But it's one of those things where I see it and it's like, ah, man, I feel like I gotta call it out, you know?
Back in martial arts. This was not part of
So
the
he's got
plan,
butterflies
so I
in
have
right
to
now.
find
He was
a way
trying to go for a
win.
butterfly sweep.
Luckily, my opponent
He's got the
gives
leg
me
right
his
there.
leg,
He's trying.
so I try to
Ooh,
break it.
oh man,
But the referee tells me
that's pretty crazy. If he was going for a foot lock that had torque on it, right? Whether it was a heel hook or not, that's not something you just tell someone they're not allowed to do. That's a disqualification. He should have been disqualified for that. Like you would be DQ'd for that. You know, at least tournaments I go to, typically you'd be DQ'd for that.
I'm not allowed to do that.
Is that he had done to him in not the beginning of the video, but the beginning of the training.
And just like that, I proved my point. Because no matter what martial art we practice, it's important that we don't lose sight of its original purpose.
If he would have just stood up, that would never have happened.
At the end of the day, it's not what you
If he would have just shot in for a takedown, that never would have happened.
do, but how you do it. Because every martial art has its time and place. But one thing is for sure. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it.
Yep, it's real. There are no second places on the street.
So, I did some research, and it turns out that this statistic is for law enforcement, because their job is to take a suspect down to the ground and put handcuffs on them. It doesn't apply to street fighting or self-defense for civilians. So the next time somebody tells you that 90% of fights end up on the ground, tell them, yeah, if you're a cop.
You see, now I find this to be very interesting because he almost tries to kind of turn around and validate karate by doing this video where he's kind of cute about like being like, yeah, I'm not good at jujitsu. Jujitsu's real and it's tough and it's hard. But like, you know, if it was a street fight, my karate would totally fuck you up. Like that's kind of the implication with that, the way that I take it anyway, right? And that little tidbit at the end is interesting to me because you have to ask yourself how many civilian street fights are taken into account in terms of statistics. I don't think people get into street fights and then turn around and go, oh, I need to run to the census man. I need to go to the census man and I need to tell him that I was in a fight this year so that he can take the logistics of that fight, right? Law enforcement, yes, their job is to try and subdue a suspect, and that's going to mean that typically they end up getting put on the ground. But taking a suspect down to the ground is not going to be the same as getting into a fight that goes to the ground. And what I mean by that is, if I'm sitting here and a guy starts getting aggressive with me, I end up taking him to the ground, I subdue him, he gets put in the cuffs, and that's that, right? That's not the same as a legitimate fight where this guy's coming at me, I'm coming at him. It's a drawn out process or altercation, right? Now, what it all comes down to is how the statistics were taken in that situation, right? How were the statistics taken? What is considered to be a fight versus basically just a situation where there was kind of an unruly suspect that was taken to the ground? What is the difference between those two things, right? I don't know. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, aha, well, it doesn't matter anyway, because actually, right, I'm not going to sit here like that. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that he enters a white belt tournament and he wins gold off of some very basic moves. He would have ended up losing if he got somebody who actually knew how to grapple outside of pulling fucking guard, right? And now he's trying to sit here and make this like weird little video. I just thought it was strange, you know. I like Jesse Enkamp. I think his stuff is interesting and educational and things like that. As somebody who loves martial arts and not just the arts themselves, but like the history and the lore and other things like that behind them, it's it's interesting. But this video was like really strange because it's a little bit different compared to the other videos by him. There's a certain snootiness that I'm not accustomed to from him that kind of makes me sit here like, oh, so this guy's kind of a bastard. This guy's actually kind of a bastard, isn't he? That's the type of dude he is, isn't he? Right? But I'm sure he's actually a nice guy. He probably just didn't realize how he came off in this video, you know? Should the ref have stood the guy up? In my opinion, that's the way that it should go. If you're going to pull guard and then just fucking sit there, like, I think that you should stand somebody up, right? But it gets into this weird thing where it's like, yeah, but it's a grappling art. You're supposed to be doing grappling. Like, there's one guy who's doing grappling, and then there's another guy who is running away from the grappling because he just doesn't want to have to pull guard. It's like a weird thing, but basically, I just don't like the gamesmanship that has arisen around Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't think it's a good thing for the sport. And I think that is partially kind of the point that he is making in this video as well, right? Because he straight up said, like, hey, let's not forget the true purpose of this art, what it was supposed to be. Now, I will say that by the time Judo, which is what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came from, by the time Judo was created, it wasn't a samurai art, right? It was created in the 1860s, if I remember, by Jigoro Kano, or Kano, I believe it was Kano. I don't think there were many samurai back then, right? In fact, you know what? Let's check something real quick, right? I'm trying to get a date here, right? All right, so you know what? 1868, Judo is an unarmed modern Japanese martial art, Olympic sport since 1964, and the most prominent form of jacket wrestling competed internationally. Judo was created in 1882. Okay, so you have 1868, and a little bit under 20 years later, I want to say 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 15 years later, right? Just under 15 years later is when Judo was created, right, officially, all right? Judo wasn't even for the samurai. Judo was 20 years younger. Judo was 15 years younger than the samurai, right? And if you take a look at my most recent video, martial arts were not created in Asia or something like that, right? I don't remember the names of my own videos. If you look at my most recent video, you'll even see examples of what Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which is what I would assume the samurai were trained in. I guess I would assume that's what it was. I mean, look, like, you can sit there and talk about like what the original intent of the sport and things like that was, but it wasn't. You know, it was a form of self-defense and a form of competition. You know, maybe a form of dispute settling, let's say, right? But the original point of the art was not for warfare in that way, right? Well, I'll say that much. And overall, I agree with what he's saying, but it just feels like it's an attempt for him to be like, ha, look at me, I'm really good at jiu-jitsu, even though I'm a karate guy. That must mean jiu-jitsu. There's something wrong with jiu-jitsu, you know? Not there's something wrong with the guy I rolled with. There's something wrong with jiu-jitsu. That's what it is. It's just weird, you know? What are you trying to look up? Isn't sword fighting like Sanbo or Sanbo or some shit? I don't know what that I don't know what that is. But yeah, it was just weird. You know, it was just a weird video. I wanted to take a look at it. I didn't even think it was going to be that weird. I didn't think it was going to be that weird or anything.